Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Ini John McCoy, and coming up on the show today, the United Nations launches hunts for startups and enterprises changing the face of food systems. South Africa warns of vaccine appetite. Mining companies to invest about $1.7 trillion towards a low-carbon world. Well, it's a new week, and we begin today's show with activities at intraday in Africa, where all the markets were in the green. The JSE in South Africa jumped 0.52%, while the NGX index rose 0.35%. Same with Egypt, which stood at 10,680.94. Kenya ended Friday's session positive at 0.34%. And in the Middle East, markets in the Gulf region at intraday is mixed, while the Abu Dhabi index lost 0.14%, Dubai's index gained 0.36%. The market in Saudi Arabia was positive at 0.63%, while Qatari markets gained 0.14%. Move on to Europe now, where stocks were mixed this morning as investors weigh the prospect of lower interest rate for longer on the back of subsiding inflationary pressure. Well, we have Chelsea. She's standing by at Frankfurt to give us more details from there. Hello, Chelsea. Good to have you this Monday morning or Monday afternoon.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, European stocks followed U.S. indices to new records to start off the trading week as economies reopened. Germany's DAX seemed to be lagging behind, though. Why is that?
Well, that's true. Here in Germany, we see the DAX actually down today a little under 0.5%, and that's as other stock indices, including the FTSE and the broader Euro stocks, have hit record highs once again. And really, this is a trend we've been seeing over the past couple of weeks. The DAX has really lagged behind and is not really even anywhere close to hitting a new record anytime soon. Part of this is because the stocks that have been doing very well over recent days, particularly, especially today, things like miners, other commodity producers. We don't have many of those here in Germany, so we're sort of missing out on some of those big boosts we're seeing on the market. But Germany also is still very cautiously moving towards reopening, so there is still a bit of economic uncertainty here. Many states, federal states here in Germany, have laid out plans to reopen things like outdoor dining or tourism. But generally, we don't have a nationwide plan yet for how to reopen the economy. So there's still uncertainty about when we really will start to see the German economy pick back up.
Well, still staying with Germany, the vaccine maker BioNTech, their shares surged after it laid out plans to build a factory in Singapore. Why are investors so excited about this?
Well, it's been a big day for BioNTech. Not only did they announce that they plan to build this factory in Singapore where they'll be able to produce hundreds of millions of doses of their coronavirus vaccine that they've made with Pfizer, but they also reported really a blockbuster first quarter. They said that their revenue went up from about 27 million euros in the last year to over 2 billion in this quarter, so nearly a 100-fold increase. They also reported a quarterly profit that was quite large. So they are really starting to see the benefits of their vaccine sales. They have over a billion doses that have been ordered from governments around the world. They expect to earn about 12 billion euros from that in the years ahead. So I think investors are looking at both these earnings and their plans for expanding, for building up these factories in other parts of the world, and seeing really a long-term strategy for BioNTech.
All right, so EU and India have agreed trade reboot to confront China. What are the details to this agreement?
Well, this was announced over the weekend after a meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and also the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. They said that they do want to restart these talks, and the EU and India had been in discussions over a trade deal about 8 years ago when those trade talks fell apart, and they haven't really revisited them since then. But really, the landscape has shifted a lot in the past couple of years. Both the EU and China are both the EU and India, are very worried about the rise of China, and we've seen the EU actually cancel its own investment deal with China, and it seems to be pivoting here towards India. And India, of course, is really a growing economy right now. Of course, they're stuck. They're really battling a very severe wave of coronavirus infections, but even so, they're still expected to post one of the strongest economic growth rates this year in the world, about 11% according to the IMF, and they have a growing population. So the EU does see India as a potential replacement for China in this, in terms of its trade makeup. So for the EU, there's a clear demand, and there could be a clear market in India. But even so, there are a lot of experts warning about getting too excited about this, because as we saw in the last round of trade talks back in 2013, there's still a lot of issues that divide India and the EU, things like tariffs on uncertain products and geographical labels that say, okay, this is a French wine or something like this. So there are still a lot of hurdles to reaching a deal.
Yeah, and I guess another hurdle they will have to deal with is the recent spike in COVID-19 cases in India. Well, thank you so much, Chelsea, for the updates. Enjoy the rest of your day. Well, we now move over to the UK. While expectations are high on the next set of easing the lockdown in England, Chimi was expressing to Juliana early in the morning how she would love to hug her. Well, we have other issues to also discuss. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon. Okay, so once again, we are talking about house prices. It has climbed to about £20,000 in the last year because of buying frenzy prompted by the stamp duty holiday. Some have called it fear of missing out, FOMO. Should we expect this to last for as long as the stamp duty is extended for?
Yes and no, Chimaze. Definitely the stamp, Chimaze, Inni. I'm thinking of Chimaze's hug. Hopefully you'll be giving me one too,
Yes,
Inni.
I know.
But of course, the stamp duty is going to be coming to an end in September. And the fact that this data from Halifax does show that prices have increased steadily since March, then we can put it all to the stamp duty holiday, because it was then, of course, that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, did extend the stamp duty holiday. So if you want to buy a house in the UK, the average price is about £258,000. I pulled out my calculator. That's the equivalent to about 150 million naira. If you're lucky enough to live in London, you can double that to about 300 million naira for a price of a property. In the past year, it's risen by about 8.2%. This is the fastest year-on-year rise in about 5 years. So good if you own a property, pretty bad if you want to get on the housing ladder. However, there are so many government schemes. Most recently, there's that 5% mortgage. Boris Johnson and the Conservative government are attempting to transition generation rent into generation buy. A lot of people are happy with this. Is this going to last beyond September, beyond the furlough coming to an end and stamp duty coming to an end? That's a huge question, but we do know that interest rates are very, very low at the moment. That's prompting people to buy. And also as well, the pandemic, lots of people have been looking at their Zoom backgrounds, looking at their surroundings and deciding that they do want a new property. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see indeed. Well, the pound has risen to over $1.40. What's the update on market data this time?
Yeah, well, the FTSE had a pretty positive start this morning, opened up firmly in positive territory. And as you said, the big talk in the square mile is about the pound rising swiftly above that $1.40 mark. It hasn't done that since February. Lots of people keeping their eyes squarely focused on Wednesday when we're going to get GDP numbers. It will show that in the first quarter of the year, GDP did contract. But of course, that's to be expected because we know that the vast majority of the British economy was in lockdown, but it's not going to contract as much as had been anticipated, which is why we could actually see the pound rally against the dollar much higher than that $1.40. Worth mentioning that a lot of the airlines are in negative territory at the moment. That's because, of course, everybody was waiting to hear from the Transport Minister, Grant Shapps, on Friday. He did announce that there are several countries that are going to be on the green list, which means you don't need to quarantine on your way back from those holidays when you reach Britain. But some of the most popular tourism destinations for British holidaymakers were left off the list, which is why there's been a mass sell-off in the travel-related stocks. So the FTSE All-Share at intraday is up 0.12%. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.20%. And the FTSE 250, the domestic market, is down by 0.10%. In the currencies market, the British pound, as we were saying, is up against the US dollar by 0.92%. Up on the euro by 0.82% and up on the Japanese yen by 0.97%.
And after 141 years, Provident Financial is to close its doorstep lending business, and this will put about 2,100 jobs at risk. What's the backstory to this?
Yeah, well, Provident Finance pretty much is in a controversial market of credit selling. They've been known for going door to door, selling their products, and then they would go back to the customer at their doorstep and collect that money. It used to be pretty popular, but over the past couple of years, there's been a series of pretty controversial falls, one of them being Wonga. Amigo Loans has also been in the headlines recently. A lot of customer complaints. The Financial Ombudsman has really opened up a huge series of criteria to allow a lot of people who had suffered financially from taking some of these high credit loans, and Provident Financial have been one of them. They did release their trading report earlier this morning, showing that in the last financial year, 2020, they lost over £113 million. That compared to about £100 million profit the year earlier. So they have decided that they are going to wind down this part of their market. That's not the only part. They do have a series of other lending capabilities, one of them being the Vanquis credit card, which is also a little bit controversial, but also highly popular. Within their losses, about £80 million, so the vast majority of the losses that they have reported so far is through this door-to-door lending. So they just feel that the best thing to do is to wind it up. And I think it's really pretty much been welcomed by most within the industry that do think that there's a time to close the door on that type of lending, which does sometimes put people in trouble. And of course, if you're going to get people knocking on your door asking for the money, it can cause terror in customers. I think bosses said it's going to cost them about £100 million to wind down that business by the end of the year.
Wow. All right. Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you for the update as usual. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Well, moving on now, stock markets. Stock markets in Asia Pacific were broadly higher today, shrugging off the weaker than expected April U.S. jobs report, while all futures advanced. South Korea's Kospi was one of the largest gainers, rising 1.63% to close at 3,249.30 in the first session of the week. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 rose 0.55% to end the session at 29,518.34, and the Topix jumped 0.99% to 1,952.27. Greater China markets were mixed. The Shanghai Composite edged up 0.27% to 3,427.99. While stocks in Shenzhen jumped 0.19% to 2,243.91 at the close. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell 0.3% in late Monday trade. We'll just take a break now. When we come back, we have more stories for you on Business Incorporated. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, about 20 years ago, 6 leaders from the West African states declared their intentions of proceeding towards a monetary union among the NCFA franc countries in the region. As a first step, the monetary union was to spread towards all states in ECOWAS region by 2004. Now, the ECOWAS dream is getting close to reality, with France beginning a transfer of 5 billion euros in support of reforms for the currency in the region. France Minister of Finance has assured that they will perform and it will be implemented to the fullest and will support autonomy to countries in the region to invest in financial institutions and instruments of their choice, with France no longer keeping the reserve account. Matt Kindiger, the Associate Practice Lead of SSA Frontier View, joins us now to discuss how soon this can be and the reality of it. Hello, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the program today.
Yeah. So why is this significant, and will it accelerate the introduction of the new eco currency despite disruptions caused by COVID-19?
Yes, so this certainly is a very positive step forward in terms of the introduction of the eventual introduction of the new eco-currency. It really shows that the French government is serious about its commitments that it's made a couple of years ago to implement the changes that are needed to pave the way for the introduction of the eco-currency. So yes, we think it's a positive development, and it makes the currencies its implementation more likely. But in terms of timeframes, certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has delayed the currency's debut. It was originally meant to be introduced, as you said, several years ago. The most recent deadline was June 2020, and that has been postponed. We don't have a clear deadline yet in terms of the implementation of the eco-currency, but recent comments by French lawmakers suggest that we are working towards a target date of around about 2023 or 2025. So after a very ambitious time frame, we probably think we are looking at about 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years before the currency is introduced. So a couple of years to go, I think.
So with this timeline, how soon, maybe after these 2 or 3 years, how soon do we expect businesses to see changes in practice?
Yes, so once the currency is introduced, so I think businesses probably want to see, they want to plan ahead, they want to get a sense of what will change once the currency is introduced. So the real advantage of the eco for West African countries is that it will allow them to have more policy sovereignty when it comes to monetary policy. But that's in theory. But in practice, we don't think there's going to be very much change when the currency is introduced, at least initially. And this is probably because there seems to be no clear consensus between the major economies that will use the eco-currency, so namely Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal. There's no clear consensus over how they would want to change the way the currency is managed. So, say, for example, if they wanted to remove the peg to the euro or allow a depreciation. Additionally, economies, both these economies, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, the major powerhouses that will use the eco, both economies are doing quite well, and they're likely to continue to perform well over the next couple of years. And so there probably will be very little political pressure for a major change to the way the eco is managed.
So do you expect that this will become a common currency for the broader region, maybe countries including Ghana, Nigeria?
Yeah, so that's the really big question, but I think it's a much longer term question we need to think about. So the long term aspiration certainly is for Ghana and Nigeria to join the eco-currency. However, in practice, I don't think any of the parties are going to rush into this, and this is for several reasons. One is that both Nigeria and Ghana have quite significant fiscal pressures at the moment as a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so both those countries will want to stabilize their public finances before they apply to join a common currency. And domestically, from a political perspective, I think there's very little pressure to join the eco, especially in Nigeria's case. So Nigeria is Africa's, or especially West Africa's economic powerhouse. And it has a very particular exchange rate regime, and so adopting the eco-currency would result in very significant policy changes that may not necessarily be in the interests of Nigeria in the short term. So we think it's probably going to take a number of years before both Ghana and Nigeria consider applying for membership of the eco.
So it's obviously a long-term project. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your thoughts with us on the eco-currency issue.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. So the United Nations Food Systems Summit has announced a competition to identify the best small and medium-sized enterprises from across the world who are transforming food systems for a better tomorrow. The summit has launched a unique contest named Best Small Businesses, Good Food for All, which will surface and name 50 small and medium-sized businesses worldwide whose work best exemplifies the summit's aim of delivering all 17 Sustainable Development Goals by providing healthy, sustainable food and livelihood for all. The competition recognizes those playing a key role in building back better from the pandemic while calling attention to the challenges they've been battling to overcome. A survey carried out shows that the pandemic has disproportionately affected smaller businesses across the globe, especially those led by women. For example, the revenues of European SMEs alone saw reductions as much as 70%, while the World Bank estimates that businesses in developing countries were especially hit hard, with revenues down 70% at the peak of the crisis, compared to only 45% in OECD countries. The summit will celebrate those playing their parts to transform through innovation the way small businesses produce, consume, and dispose of food, offering lessons for building greater economic resilience and sustainability. Each summit is to help inform global leaders with the priorities and resources these businesses need to thrive, and all applicants must be invited to future Food Systems Summit events. In South Africa and India have recently submitted proposals on the World Trade Organization's agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights that would allow for a temporary waiver of certain aspects of TRIPS. This would mean wider access to technologies needed to produce vaccines and medicine. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa believes that vaccines need to be viewed as a global public good, and intellectual property, knowledge, technology, and data related to COVID-19 vaccines should be available to all. He's been speaking against a situation in which the populations of advanced, rich countries are safely inoculated, while millions in poorer countries die in the queue. This, he says, would be tantamount to vaccine apartheid and will set a devastating precedent in the quest to realize a more egalitarian world and ability to handle future pandemics. And mining companies need to invest nearly $1.7 trillion in the next 15 years to help supply enough copper, cobalt, nickel, and other metals needed for the shift to a low-carbon world, according to consultancy World Mackenzie. The United Nations, the United States, Britain, Japan, Canada, and others raised their targets on cutting carbon emissions to halt global warming at a summit in April hosted by the U.S. President Joe Biden. Meeting those targets will need large-scale deployment of electric vehicles, storage for power generated from renewables and electricity transmission, all of which require industrial materials such as lightweight aluminum and metals used in batteries such as cobalt and lithium. And with that, we say thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Business Incorporated. I'm Ini John Mekwa.